How many times in your life has someone told you, if you want to be wealthy, you need to save money? Well, for me, this was just about the only advice about money that I ever heard of growing up. It took me a long time to realize that this advice fell into the category of the helpless being led by the clueless. In other words, I was being given advice on how to be wealthy by people who didn't have the first clue of what they were talking about. And it's this kind of bad advice that can set people down the wrong path. So today, let's talk about why this advice is so wrong and what you should be doing instead. Let's dig into this by starting with the fact that there are some major limitations with traditional ways of saving money that can negatively affect your long-term wealth growth potential, because only saving money is a fundamentally flawed mindset. If the only thing you ever do is save money in a traditional savings account, or worse yet, under your mattress, you're severely limiting your growth potential, because stagnant money is lazy money. I mean, I don't know about you, but I want my money working for me, and your money really can't work for you all that well if it's just sitting around. So first of all, historically speaking, traditional savings accounts don't have good interest rates. You stick your money in the account, and depending on the market, you'll be getting anywhere from 0 to 1% interest. In fact, today, as I was thinking about this video, I logged onto my Chase account and checked my own savings account, and I was only getting 0.01% interest. This is absolutely appalling. Why would anybody put their money here? Well, in case you're wondering, I only have this account because in order to get the free checking account when I was 18 years old, I had to accept the savings account as well. I don't really use this today. Now, we can't ignore the fact that these days there's a lot of options beyond traditional savings accounts, such as high yield savings accounts and money market accounts. And as I record this video, it's January 2024, and most of these accounts are offering above 5% interest, which is amazing. But we're in a very particular market situation right now, and this is really not the norm. Pay attention to this, because if you're putting money in these accounts right now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it could be a very bad thing very soon. Don't forget about these things in a few years when the interest rates change, because they're probably going to go down. But regardless, in the grand scheme of things, whether your savings account is getting you 0.01% interest or 5% interest, let's be honest, that sucks for long-term wealth building. Beyond poor interest rates, you also have horrible regulatory restrictions and insurance with savings accounts. For example, let's say that you decided to just save money to prepare for retirement, and you kept everything in a savings account. You get close to $500,000 in the account over the course of a few decades, and one day your bank gets caught up in a bunch of scandals or breaks a bunch of laws, and the federal government comes in and shuts them down. What happens to your money? Well, the FDIC will only insure your money for up to $250,000. That means that you'll get a payout of $250,000 if your bank fails, but you'll lose the rest of your money. It's not a good situation. In addition to rather poor security for your money, savings accounts usually, but not always, have minimum balance requirements or minimum deposit requirements to even stay open. In these ways, they just really aren't that attractive. Finally, for what little interest growth you do end up getting in the account, there's absolutely no tax benefits like you can get in other types of accounts. Any interest that you gain gets taxed as income on your income tax return. In other words, any growth is fully taxed based on your income. Considering there are so many other tax-advantaged vehicles out there, this again is just not a great option. But okay, beyond the limitations of a traditional savings account, let's go back to the growth aspect. With interest rates being so low historically, just saving money isn't going to cut it in terms of inflation. Most of these accounts won't even come close to matching inflation. But what does that mean exactly? How does inflation affect the money that you save? Is it really that significant? Well, yes, unfortunately it is, especially when your money isn't really growing to begin with. Let's take the extreme scenario where you've got someone who is a high income earner and also a super saver, but is also paranoid about investing in the stock market for some reason. They make lots of money, they save it all, and they keep most of it in cash in their house in a safe. For the record, this is ridiculous, but let's go with it. The problem here is that inflation is kind of like a negative investment. Much like the stock market, inflation rates vary, but the Fed targets about 2% inflation per year, and over the last 30 years, this has roughly been the average. So this means that the money that is held in cash loses 2% of its buying power every year. The dollar value remains the same because it's just cash, but each year that cash buys 2% less than it did the year previously. In this example, let's say that our high-income super saver extraordinaire squirreled away close to $2 million over about 35 years. Well, thanks to inflation, his $2 million mattress made of cash will only be able to buy about $1.6 million worth of products in today's money. He would have lost close to 25% of his buying power just simply due to inflation. Obviously, we don't want that to happen. So as a general rule, you can assume that investment or interest-generating vehicles that you have that are making less than 2% interest per year is probably near break even. This means that cash or low interest yield savings accounts are hurting you more than they're helping you. So, okay, if saving money isn't the key to building wealth, then what should you be doing instead? Well, if it wasn't already obvious, saving money is important, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. If you've watched my stuff before, by now you know that what I teach is a very simple mantra for wealth generation. You make the money, you budget the money, you save the money, you invest the money, and finally, you can spend the money. Oh, and by the way, stay out of debt. There's a lot to this mantra, but in short, you have to be making money. You have to have some kind of job or income source. Once you have that, you need a budget. You need a monthly plan of the money you're going to make and the money you're going to spend, and you need to stick to it. Then you save the money. What we're talking about here is an emergency fund. We aren't talking about saving for the rest of your life. We're talking about saving up enough money to a point where you have a solid emergency fund. Then you have to invest some of your money. You need to have an investment vehicle that will beat inflation and hopefully beat it by a lot. By the way, the S&P 500 has grown by more than 10% every year on average since its inception. So if you don't know where to start, you should probably start there. Finally, you have to stay out of debt. Or if you have debt, we get rid of that debt during the savings phase. So let's dig into that a bit and also answer the question of, can you save too much money in savings? And if so, what's the ideal amount? Well, this depends on whether or not you're currently in debt. My general advice is that if you have high interest consumer debt like credit cards, personal loans, payday loans, car notes, student loans, HELOCs, title loans, installment loans, debt consolidation loans, buy now, pay later scams, layaways, tax debts to the IRS, or anything else that you owe money on every month, you need to start out with what we call a starter emergency fund. As a general rule, this should be about 1 month's worth of expenses for the average person. The idea here is that you work on saving up that starter emergency fund, and then you use that as your safety net to cushion any stumbles that you have while you work on paying off that high interest consumer debt. Depending on how bad your debt situation is, this might take years. But speaking from experience, trust me when I say it's worth it. Once you have all the high interest consumer debt paid off, or if you just don't have any to begin with, I generally recommend 6 months worth of expenses saved up as a full emergency fund. It may seem like a lot, but a full emergency fund is the secret to the success of anyone you've ever met who is financially stable. Once you're done with all that, make sure that you're investing enough money to retire comfortably and blow the rest on whatever you want. If this is your first time hearing about all this, welcome to my channel. Check out some more content here on the screen where I dive deeper into all of these topics.